Hey there, and welcome to exercise number 77. If you want to solve this exercise for yourself, then click on the link in the description. If not, keep watching and we're going to solve it together. In this one, we need to write a function named flow that receives one or more parameters. Each of those parameters is a pure function. So if you're wondering what is a pure function, I added here a link that's going to go to Wikipedia and explain everything to you. Yeah, that's it. But just in a few words, I'm just going to say it. A pure function is a function that doesn't have any side effects and doesn't interact with anything other than its parameters. So for example, this function sum of a, b returns a plus b is pure. But if I have a function get current time that actually does return date.now, let's say, then this one is not pure, because if I call this one again and again and again, I'm going to have different values because it interacts with stuff outside its parameters. Now, this is just a short explanation. There's more to pure functions, but I just want to say it in case you've never worked with them, right? You can think about them just as normal functions for now. So going back, we have a function flow that will receive one or more functions as a parameter. Now, this function should return another function. We're going to call it run, that will receive again one or more parameters. Now, this function will successively invoke the pure functions in order. So it will call the functions one by one in order, passing the result of the previous invocation to the next one. Then the run function will return the result of the last pure function invocation. So when we get to the end, we return that result. And I added a small note here saying that the first pure function should receive, of course, as parameters all the parameters received by run. Now, again, I know this might be a bit complicated, and since we're in the advanced sections, the descriptions are, kind of complex because there's a lot going on, but I think looking at the example is going to make things 10 times easier. So let's do that. So I have here two pure functions, add, that receives two parameters and adds them, and square, which receives a parameter and computes the square of that parameter, which is a number, of course, so it multiplies it by itself. Now, the run function we're gonna get by calling flow with add, square, and square. And then we're gonna console log run of 1, 2, and we get 81. And here below is the explanation. So we first invoke add. Why add? Because it's the first one here. With 1, 2, the parameters we send to run. That gives us 3. Then we take that result and move on to the next function. So we take the number 3 and pass it to square, the first one here, the first square. And we're going to do 3 multiplied by 3, which is going to be 9. Then we're going to take that 9 and move on to the next function, so the next square. So we're going to do 9 times 9, which is going to be 81. And since this is the last invocation, we're just going to return it. So the final result is 81. So the idea of the exercise and the magic kind of behind it is to find a way to call those functions without knowing how many we have, what parameters they have, and so on. Okay, so that was the description of the exercise. Let's move on to the solution. So you can see here we're doing a spread of the parameters, right, of the functions, because I don't know how many there are. So I cannot just do function 1, function 2, function 3, because we may have 10 or 20. So we're just going to spread them here, functions. This function needs to return another function, right? As it says here in the description. So let's just return it. Or actually, let's console const run is. And we're going to declare it and then return it. And then here it says that run will receive one or more parameters. But again, I don't know how many. So let's just spread them here. And I'm going to call it params. Now, I'm going to need to have the result in a variable. So let's just create it. And initially, I'm just going to call the first function with the parameters, right? Because the parameters we get to run, we use them to call the first function. So we have the result here. And then if I just return it, let's just return it. And then I should be able to get this code. And we should get 3, which is correct, because it only runs the first function, add, with those parameters, 1 and 2. So we get 3, which is good. Now let me just comment this. And let's move on to the actual, let's say, hard part, which is like, okay, what do we do about the rest? Well, I know how many functions there are, so I can just do a normal for. So I'm just gonna do for let I is 1, because I already used the first one. Then I is less than functions.length, I plus plus. And every time I'm gonna use the previous result and pass it to the next function. So I'm just gonna go and do result is functions of I. So I'm gonna call the next function on position I, and I'm gonna pass it the result. And finally, we return it. So this remains unchanged. So again, what happens here? We start from the second function, the one at index 1. We go up until the end. We call each function, passing it the previous result, and we again overwrite it. So every time we pass it with the previous result. And now if I uncomment this code, voila, we get 81. Now if I go here and I do square again, I should get 81 times 81, which is this number. So that makes sense. Now let's say I'm gonna do another function that's gonna be add 5, that's gonna receive a number, and it's gonna do a plus 5. And then here I'm gonna do, after this square, I'm gonna do add 5. Again, you see here 5 was added to this, so it works. It calls the functions until the last one. This looks legit, so let's test our solution, and voila, it works. Cheers, and see you in the next one.